2. All right, Phil, outside of survival pod out here in the wasteland. And this is just a thought I've had. I've heard people say this off and on, that one day the demographics, they're going to change. And, all these people having children. And I do agree with that. The future belongs to people that are there. But the question is, what type of future are you really building? You're like, well, what do you mean? Look at where the most massive populations are happening. Generally, reproductive rates are incredible in some of the most shithole third world countries. What am I getting at with this? Yeah, well, Freedom Phil, like to subscribe. Let's get into it. Hey, turn up the video speed. And as I always say, this channel for adults, not for children. If you're some lazy parent just letting your kids watch anything, yeah, I ain't my gig if your kids regurgitate something I said. But to be real, quit being a shitty parent. And as always, those that don't stay on topic or just come up commenting about some random shit, yeah, robots and retards. Only about maybe less than 5% of my followers are actually thinking people. Let's get into it. I was thinking about this the other day, something somebody pointed out. Because you think about the concept, and I actually agree with the Islamic individuals that have said, hey, if you're not having kids in your countries, and we're having kids, eventually, just due to voting, we'll take over. Assuming there isn't some catastrophic war or something else like that. Theoretically, they're right. But then you look at the countries that are having the most children in general, like huge families. Are they places that people really want to live? And I think you can see just how people vote with their feet. And what do you mean? Like all these people going over to America, say from Somalia, that are scamming the Minnesota government. And this isn't just Somalia, it's countries all over the world, all different peoples. And I don't see this as a racial thing whatsoever. I just see it as your culture, your country is failure for the most part. It's so bad that you're deciding to go anywhere else. Like you see huge populations, for instance, in India. And one could argue China's greatly improved. And there's some speculation whether their population is as big as they report. Some people say it's real, some people say it's not. But you have to really measure a country not by your population, but by how good of a life that culture, that country can produce. And I'm just evaluating when I look at something like, some of these broken African countries or South American countries, some parts of India. And I'm just like, this doesn't look like something you would even want to live in. So the concept that in the far off future, that the future will belong to whoever has children, this is true. This is very true. But in the long game, if you have tons of people and import a culture that frankly can't even sustain itself, and like, what do you mean it can't sustain itself? People are coming from other countries into Western countries because their country doesn't work. Well, I mean, I just say, I don't know. It doesn't fucking work. If it worked, you wouldn't leave. People don't just up and leave their country because it's great. They leave because it's a fucking shithole. Why do you think so many people, you might love your hometown, your home country, like you see even in America where people live in some small town, they love their hometown, but they know they ain't going to make it there. So they move to somewhere else where the money is, where the food is, where what's going on. Now, I'll be real about it. Is there a point at which either the robots, they flip the switch and the robot maids, the Terminator waifu switches on and just kills the owners? I mean, what's the plan? Because if you got a bunch of people who come from some third world shithole and they can't even feed themselves, let alone the children, and the only reason they're living as good as they are in the first world is because they're parasites. No, we're not going to be nice about this. When you got 89% of your populace living off of, government benefits, and I don't care which group you're from, what you're doing does not fucking work. And it doesn't work. So how do you think, and by the way, no offense to people on the dole, Americans on the dole, but how many generations since Lyndon B. Johnson's, great expansion, have generations of people just lived on benefits? And is that solved the problem? The answer is no. The benefits have not solved a goddamn thing. So what ends up happening is that after generation to generation, maybe a few of the people aren't dummies and they figure it out. But you're going to have to clean house eventually. And you want to know an example of how this shit doesn't work out? You want to understand how this shit does not work out whatsoever? Like, say, for instance, the Islamic countries that keep on, basically saying, we're not taking these people in. If they won't take their own people in, that tells you they know it's not going to work. And they know it's not going to work because they took them in back in the 70s. And then those people fomented, rebellions and terrorist groups against their own people, the people that tried to save them. So I don't know why people think that if you bring in a bunch of ain't shit motherfuckers from another country who can't manage to keep their own country stable, that somehow this is going to save a first world nation. We all know that ain't true. But that's where sometimes I just look at this entire world and I say, this shit just strikes me as a simulation. It just strikes me as a fucking simulation, man. There is no goddamn way you could tell me that it makes any sense. But then again, what if you're just trying to set up the situation for a future civil war or a future, world war? Where people are so pissed off, they just end up saying, you know what? There was those other people and life was better before that showed up. And then it just causes them to, become highly productive, highly destructive. It ain't like we haven't seen that before. But I just like to know what the game plan is on that one. Like, do you really think bringing in a bunch of people that the only game they know how to do is scamming? If that's all you know how to do you really think the kids of those people are going to be worth a shit? I'm just saying. If your idea is you're going to replace people with a bunch of other people, and yeah, they have kids. And you know what? Let's just call the God's honest truth about that for a second. Just like a lot of these countries, like I hear in Japan, it's very expensive to live there. In a modern situation, it's not the same situation that the boomers had, And in America, same thing. Look at the house prices back in the day. Look at like the jobs people used to be able to do and support a family. Maybe Americans and Europeans and, Asian countries, they would be having more children, wild thought here, if the cost of living wasn't so over the top. So what do we got to do to change that to where your own native people have families? Because I got to be real about it. I think there's a lot of women out there that would like to have a family. Some chicks, they want to be workers and do the jobs and all that shit. But I think there's a lot of women who want to have kids. And I think there's some dudes that want to be papas too. But the reality is that the cost of living, when you can't afford you can barely afford your rent, let alone, nutritious food. I'm talking nutritious, not just some manufactured crap. When you can't afford a decent life for yourself, you're actually being a benevolent person by not cranking out children you can't afford to feed. But then you see a bunch of people who just showed up yesterday that are living off your benefits, and that is a reason to be really pissed off for any country. When you're paying 35 to 45% in your taxes, and somebody just showed up yesterday and they're getting a free ride. They're not even heritage people of your country. Like multiple generations that have lived there. They're literally just someone, hey, yesterday we showed up, gimme, gimme, gimme. I mean, fuck, at least the boomers had the generosity to work before they started screaming for Social Security. But yeah, if the future belongs to whoever's there and whoever has the children, and the culture will be decided by those value sets, then let's just be honest. The future's kind of fucked. Because I'm taking a look at a lot of the third world shit that goes on in a lot of the world. And by the way, it's not to say it couldn't be fixed. I mean, if you look at the difference between Dubai and Saudi Arabia way back in the day and where they are today, all the hard work they had to do to build up their countries, it is possible. But, I've just, and maybe here's the reality. Maybe if it wasn't for the fact that we give people a way out, they wouldn't be fuck-ups nearly as much. That's my theory, at least. Maybe stop trying to save everybody, and we'll see who can swim. And those who will swim will be stronger. But that doesn't seem like the way. The West is so stuck on this toxic empathy. It's like Christians. Do you ever notice? They always want to save everybody but who's in their own flock. They're always out there trying to get this group or that group. They're all about saving the criminal, the drug dealer. But God forbid they help their neighbors. And what do I mean by that? Just closing thought. The situation where people can't afford daycare, and yet you got a bunch of people sitting around, boomers watching TV. You got boomers talking about how these kids are lazy, but they can't afford rent. What are you doing? Like, are you allowing someone to put up a tent in your backyard or a van or something? Something to where this person can get just a slight foothold. Like, instead of it being a cliff like this, like you're falling off a cliff, can you at least try to make it to where it's a hill they can walk up? I mean, that's what you would do if you really cared about your country, your culture. You would actually make it slightly easier for these next generation, these kids, these Zoomers, and even some of the millennials, to where they could actually get to where they got to have a normal life, a normal family. But maybe that's just a sign of the country and the culture. Like, I love capitalism for its options, but I hate it for its waste. And I hate consumerism for its waste. And after the cult, the religion, for God knows, how many decades now, of basically me, more, give me, fuck everybody that's behind me, kick the ladder out and fucking, throw a firebomb there to make sure they can't, there's no chance, Maybe this is the inevitable. But this idea, like, you're going to tell me, just because a country, like, you could say, okay, demographically, this country is going to produce enough people and they'll be, the majority population in X amount of time. Yeah, but what does their culture produce? I mean, you really just start thinking about that. What does their culture produce? And if their culture produces a situation where they are literally fleeing their countries to get to our countries, then you need to address that you should be making it easier for our country to produce the people that need to be here. As far as their countries go, and people ain't going to like hearing this, but it's another conversation for another day, maybe colonialism wasn't so bad. I know that sounds fucked up. But, like, since the moment that your country was given back to you, your country's slowly gone into the shitter. And you flee your country to come to our country, but then turn around and tell us how much you love your country, even though you don't want to live there. Maybe you're just admitting that colonialism wasn't a bad thing. And that's a whole separate conversation for another day. All right. Peace.